prioritize their investigation. Why it is important to prioritize your investigation? Because the volume of the sample which is always available to us is a limiting point. It is very less in volume. So if we prioritize the investigation, then we can come to some conclusive evidence that this patient is suffering from this infection. If we have a sample of only 50 to 100 microliter and we are ordering n number of investigations, then we will not be able to justify any of the investigation. So a specimen has to be appropriately selected. It is to be properly collected by taking all the aseptic precautions and transported to the laboratory in a stipulated time period. Here I would like to mention that volume of specimen should be adequate for a particular type of investigation you are ordering to the microbiologist. Along with the volume of the specimen, it is very important to know whether your specimen is undiluted specimen or it is diluted specimen. If it is undiluted specimen, the sensitivity of a particular diagnostic test is always better as compared to diluted specimen, as I will be discussing with you later in my talk. So what are the different type of the ocular specimens what we receive in our laboratory? These are fluid aspirates like aqueous fluid, vitreous fluid, or ocular tissue analysis like chorioretinal biopsy or the vitreous biopsy. Once we have collected the specimen, what are the investigations which are sent to us in our setup, either depending upon the clinical presentation of the patient, that once you collect the sample, they are sent either for the cytological examination or for the infectious workup. In cytological examination, they are sent for the malignant cell or different type of staining procedures they are carried out for the fungal or for the parasitic infection depending upon the clinical presentation. And infectious etiology, we will do the investigation for the bacterial, viral or fungal or parasitic infection depending upon the clinical presentation of the particular patient. So once you have collected the sample, what is the most important thing is, once the sample is collected, it should be properly labeled with the name of the patient, particular unique ID number of the patient, the type of the sample collected, whether it is an aqueous fluid, vitreous biopsy, subretinal fluid. Time of collection of sample is very, very important, because if you send your sample within a stipulated time period, that will enhance the sensitivity of your diagnosis. And type of investigation which is to be prioritized by the ophthalmologist after discussion with the infectious disease specialist and on the basis of their clinical observation. So this is to be accompanied by a properly filled performer, which requires what is the diagnosis you are expecting, treatment which is received in previously, what was the therapy your patient is receiving. Why it is important to know the treatment regarding the treatment history of the patient, because if your patient is not responding to the treatment, then we can say that yes, the patient is having, we can look for the drug resistance. If your patient, that is why the treatment history is very important, and I will be discussing with you later. Then the name of the consultant and the phone number of the consultant who is sending the samples to us, because once we are ready with the report, so that we can get back to the consultant and share our report with them. And history and the clinical findings, plays a very important role. They should be properly fit and sent to us. And the prior investigation, like if you are suspecting tubercular etiology, what is the Montu reaction or the skin test in that patient, that is also very important. After you have done all these things, what are the precautions which are to be taken if you are doing the sample collection? First of all the aseptic precautions should be taken. First of all, I will be talking about the vitreous fluid. Vitreous fluid has a higher sensitivity as compared to the aqueous fluid as far as the different diagnostic sensitivity for carrying out the different type of the diagnostic tests are concerned. Because in case of the vitreous fluid, the maximum amount of the sample which could be collected, it varies between 1 to 1.5 ml, which is always provided to us in our center. And because of the large volume, the sensitivity of any diagnostic test is improved by getting the proper volume of the sample. And if you provide to us the undiluted sample, it will further help in enhancing the sensitivity of the test. So it has an advantage of large volume of the fluid which could be obtained. Now, what is the advantage of aqueous fluid? Aqueous fluid, the major advantage is it is easy, it is quick, relatively easy to perform, and it can be carried out as in an outpatient setting. The main limiting factor of the aqueous fluid is the volume of the fluid which is sent to us. It varies between 50 microliter to 100 microliter. So because of the low volume of the fluid, we can get the false negative results with our diagnostic modality. So it could be the reason for the low sensitivity of the test in case of the aqueous fluid. So once you have collected this fluid, so how to manage these samples? I will be talking about the sample management. That is, once the specimen is collected, it should be immediately sent to the laboratory, and the specimen should be ideally processed within the 15 to 20 minutes after the collection. If there is any delay in the collection of the sample and transportation of the sample to your lab, it should be refrigerated at 4 degrees centigrade. Mostly in all the centers, refrigerators at 4 degrees centigrade refrigerators, they are there. So you can preserve your sample because the microorganisms, they are very fragile. You will not come to any conclusive evidence if there is any loss, there is any delay in the collection and transportation of the samples. So for the transportation of the samples, because most of the times now we are shifting from the conventional modalities to the molecular methods for the diagnostic, for diagnosing various type of infections, it is mandatory to maintain a cold chain. So what is a cold chain? Cold chain is a strict essential for effective recovery of microorganisms. In this, the sample should be transported in an ice box, which is a leak-proof container with the ice packs. This will help in maintaining the temperature, and which will enhance the sensitivity of your test. Now, if you don't have any facility, you want to store your sample. What are the different recommendations for the storage of your sample? Because the sample is to be stored, you can always use it in the later part for the diagnosis of your patient. Up to 1 week, you can store your sample at minus 20 degrees centigrade. If you want to use your sample later on for any type of research or any type of diagnosis, you can store it forever for quite some time at minus 80 degrees centigrade. And there are now mediums available in which you can store your sample especially at the tertiary care centers. They can store their sample for doing any type of the gene analysis or expression studies. You just have to put the sample in RNA later, and it could be stored at minus 80 degrees centigrade for quite some time, and you can carry out the studies later on in the later part. So why it is so important to store a sample at a proper temperature? What is the reason? Because we are shifting from the conventional diagnostic modalities, it has a very low sensitivity, to molecular methods which has a higher sensitivity. So the chances of nucleic acid degradation, they are very high if they are not maintained at a proper temperature. So all the sensitivity of your test, they will go down. I am not going into the technical details of what could happen and how we can improve upon. This is just for the this basic teaching that it should be stored in a cold chain, and it should be immediately sent to the laboratory in an ice box which is leak proof and which has an ice pack, or dry ice you can use for the transportation of your sample, because otherwise it can lead to your improper molecular test due to different type of technical problems, and this is one of the problem I have mentioned in this slide. So it should be sent in a properly. Cold chain maintenance is very, very important. What is next question which comes to one's mind is, what is the role of transport media for transportation of the samples once they are collected in the operation theatre to the laboratory? Transportation of the transport media of conventional kind has no place in the transportation of intraocular samples. But in case of the viral, if you are looking for any kind of viral investigation and you are suspecting that there could be a delay of more than 2 hours, then you can use the viral transport media which is provided by your laboratory to the ophthalmologist, and they can transfer their sample and it can be transferred to the laboratory even after 2 hours, and there will be no effect on the sensitivity of the test. So if the facilities for the diagnosis, they are not available at your center, then you can always ship your sample or transport your sample from one place to another place. So how to do that? First of all, according to the Infectious Disease Society guidelines, the samples should be transferred to a sterile appendrof, which is provided by the laboratory to the treating physician or the ophthalmologist. After you transfer your sample to the Append drop, it should be properly labeled as I have already explained to you, and place this Append drop into a double lock Ziploc bag, and you can keep one Ziploc bag into another Ziploc bag, that is, or a double Ziploc bag. And this Ziploc bag you can put into a thermocol box, and this box can be properly sealed and along with the ice packs, and you can transfer this sample to a reference laboratory for the diagnosis of your patient. This is the bare minimum which we can also do in our setup. So what are the recommendations of CDC for transportation of the samples? This is just for which is to be ideal condition which is to be followed. That once you put your sample into the Ziploc bag, it is to be put into this primary, this is a primary container, it is to be put into this primary container. And this primary container, because it should be covered by absorbent material, so that there should not be any chance of the leakage of the sample. So this primary container is to be put into the secondary container, which is a watertight leak-proof container. And this, in between the primary container and the secondary container, there should be a label containing the list of the contents and the shipper's label with the name, the person who is sending the sample, address of the person, contact number of the person whom to be contacted. Once you have properly put the Append drop into primary container, secondary container, properly labeled the container, then you can put it into the cardboard box, and this box can be sent to a reference lab. This is what is to be done in ideal situation. But in our setup, what we can do is you transfer the sample to the Append drop, put it into the Ziploc bag, along which is properly labeled Append drop, and then this Ziploc bag along with the properly filled performer, you just put it into a thermocol box which is a leak proof, properly seal the box with the help of the tape, and it should contain the proper mailing address and details of the sample, and you can send that sample to a reference lab in our setup along with the ice packs. Because within 24 to 48 hours, it can reach to the reference lab, and it is not going to affect the sensitivity of the test. That is how you can ship your samples to us. So now I will be talking about the processing of the sample. So whenever you collect the sample, depending upon the clinical presentation of the patient, either you send for the cytological examination or you send for the infectious investigation, whether for the parasitic, viral, fungal or bacterial investigation, depending upon the clinical presentation of your patient. In case of cytological examination, we look for we do the cytology of the fluid for the malignant cytology, or the direct smear is prepared for the parasitic and fungal or other organisms, or if the amount of the material which is available to us is quite some amount, then they can prepare the cell block. I am not a cytologist, but I am just giving you the overview how the processing is being carried out at our center. Then you can do the other techniques like immunocytochemistry, flow cytometry, and if or you can directly prepare the direct smear examination. But the main limitation, because of the low volume of the sample which is available to us, the main disadvantage is the low cellularity. To enhance the cellularity, what we can do is, what is being done in our center is, we do the cytocentrifugation. By cytocentrifugation, you centrifuge the sample at high speed, which can, as a result of which the cells, they are pallet down, and you can prepare the slide from that pallet, which will enhance the sensitivity of the cell. So, enhance the sensitivity of the test. And this is the case report we reported last year in BMJ of a primary intraocular CNS lymphoma, which was discussed by Sir in earlier presentation. Now, this is the cytocentrifuge. This is what I was talking about, in which you can concentrate your cell at high speed, and which can enhance your sensitivity. So I will just giving you the overview of the processing, what we do in our center. That for most commonly it is to talk about the parasitic infection, we look for the ocular toxoplasmosis. For ocular toxoplasmosis, either you can do the serological examination, you can do Goldman-Whitmer coefficient. If it is more than 3 or more than 3, it is significant. Or in case of immunocompromised patient, you can do the PCR from the aqueous and vitreous fluid, depending upon the presentation of your patient. And the sensitivity of the PCR using B1 gene, it varies between 60 to 70%. As we have already discussed, this is the case of toxoplasmosis which is being reported from our center. So what we do in case of viral, if we are looking for viral infection in our center, depending upon the clinical suspicion, the samples are sent to us in the laboratory. Then we can carry out either the ELISA, or the cell culture or molecular method for the diagnosis of viral infection. But both these investigations, that is the ELISA and cell culture, they have low sensitivity, whereas nucleic acid amplification techniques, they have high sensitivity, they can really help out in the rapid diagnosis of the viral infection. You can either use the conventional PCR and real-time PCR. With real-time PCR, this is a closed system. You can not only diagnose the infection, but you can also quantitate the load of the infection. So what is the sensitivity of viral PCR? It varies between 90 to 100%. And what are the disadvantages of molecular methods, what we do in our setup? It could be falsely positive or falsely negative. One of the major reasons for the false negative result are the low volume of the sample which is being sent to us. So, and the other limiting factor is because of the small volume available, there is always a limitation to test for the multiple organisms at the same time, which cannot be tested. So that could be a major disadvantage with the molecular methods. So this is my very area of interest, that is how we are doing or what we are doing for the diagnosis of tubercular uveitis in our setup, how we can diagnose the TB infection from the ocular fluids. That is, as you know, the conventional diagnostic modalities, that is the LJ medium or the culture and AFB, they have only a limited role to play because of the low sensitivity and long turnaround time. So we are using the nucleic acid amplification method for demonstration of the TB DNA from the ocular fluid. So what are the different type of nucleic acid amplification method we are dealing with? So it depends upon the analytical sensitivity. What is the analytical sensitivity is the minimum number of the mycobacterial genome which could be detected by a particular type of nucleic acid amplification technique. So, and I will be talking about the analytical specificity, that is your nucleic acid amplification technique it should be such that there should be no cross-reactivity with other type of microorganisms. So what are the nucleic acid amplification technique? What are the different factors? These are the volume of the sample. These are all technical points like method of DNA extraction, primer designing, number of targets you are using, and inhibitors in the sample, and type of nucleic acid amplification technique you are using at your setup. These are main factors which can really make a difference in the diagnosis of tubercular uveitis. So I will be discussing with you in this talk. So what are the different type of methods we are using in our setup? That is, we are using polymerase chain reaction. It could be uniplex polymerase chain reaction or multiplex polymerase chain reaction, and loop-mediated isothermal amplification test for the detection of mycobacterial DNA, real-time PCR, separate gene expert MTB RIF assay, which will not only diagnose the MTB but can give you whether your patient is suffering with rifampicin resistant mycobacterial strain or rifampicin sensitive mycobacterial strain. And last but not the least, another drug susceptibility testing technique which we have just started doing, that is a line probe assay, which is being endorsed by WHO for diagnosis of TB and detection of drug resistance. So what are the limitations of the uniplex polymerase chain reaction? Because uniplex polymerase chain reaction is a molecular method which uses only a single target for diagnosis of Mycobacterium tuberculosis DNA, and the sensitivity which varies between 30 to 59%. It could be mostly people, they have used insertion sequence as a target, or they have used because of the multiple copy number, or they have used MTB64 as a target for diagnosis of tubercular uveitis. So what is the advantage of real-time PCR? Once we are dealing with the polymerase chain reaction, has always a chance of false positive or false negative result. So with the real-time PCR, you can not only diagnose the mycobacterial infection, but you can also quantitate the load of infection. This is the study which was carried out in our center, in which we evaluated real-time PCR in the suspected cases of tubercular uveitis, and it has shown a sensitivity of almost 52%, and we have used the MTB64 as a genome for diagnosis of tubercular uveitis. And the copy number varied between 1.4 to as high as 7.61 into 10⁵ copies per ml. So what are the limitations of uniplex PCR? Because we are using a single target, And this single target could be missing in the mycobacterial genome, and we may be having the false negative test. As you know, as I have already discussed with you, in most of the places in India, the people, they are using insertion sequence because of its multiple copies they are present in mycobacterial genome. But this insertion sequence is missing in the 10 to 15% of North Indian isolate and as high as 40% of South Indian Mycobacterium tuberculosis isolate. So if we are using only the single target, there are chances that we may be missing few cases and they may be given as a falsely negative for Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So how to enhance the sensitivity of a diagnostic test? We have designed a multi-targeted PCR in which we are using 3 targets for the diagnosis of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. That is a multiple copy insertion sequence because of the multiple copies, MTP64 and the protein B. Why we have chosen these targets? Because in our previous experience, when we evaluated these 2 targets in other extrapulmonary conditions, this is also published and it has shown a very high sensitivity. So we combined all the 3 targets together and we have developed this multi-targeted PCR. As you can see, if all the 3 targets are present, it is positive for Mycobacterium genome. And if any of the 2 are present, still it is positive for Mycobacterium. If any one is present, it is positive for Mycobacterium. So by using all the 3 targets together, this is a very initial study which we published last year January. Then we used multiplex PCR. There was enhanced sensitivity up to 77.7%. But when we used only a single target, you can just appreciate from this slide, then the sensitivity was only 55.5%. By using the 3 targets together, it has enhanced from 55 to 77.7%. So by using this technique, you can really add to enhance the sensitivity for the diagnosis of tubercular uveitis. And this multi-targeted PCR was validated from University of Florida during my NIH ATRIC fellowship, and we have also filed a patent for this multi-targeted PCR in 2011. Now the next question which comes to one's mind is those persons who are living at, who are diagnosing these infections at the periphery or at the primary health center, can they use all these techniques like uniplex PCR, multiplex PCR, real-time PCR in the peripheral laboratories? No, they cannot, because there is a need for sophisticated laboratory. Then what could be the alternative? The alternative is another nucleic acid amplification technique, that is a loop-mediated isothermal amplification technique, in this loop-mediated isothermal amplification technique, you can diagnose the mycobacterial DNA. Amplification is carried out even in 1 hour in water bath, and there is no need of thermocycler, there is no need of gel documentation system. Just by adding the dye, you can know whether the amplification has taken place or not. You just have to add the reagent, add your DNA, and then you have the answer within 1 hour. This has already been shown a very high sensitivity and specificity for diagnosis of pulmonary TB as well as for the diagnosis of tubercular meningitis. We also evaluated this loop-mediated isothermal amplification in the cases which were picked up by our multiplex PCR.